Hi, Gene Monterastelli here, the editor of tappingqna.com. The video that you are about to watch is a conversation that was a part of this year's 24 Hours of Tapping. The 24 Hours of Tapping is a fundraiser for the amazing work that is done by the Peaceful Heart Network. The Peaceful Heart Network has brought tapping to migrants, refugees, prisoners, and the underprivileged in over 30 countries all over the world. As you watch this video, if you learned something, if you were touched by it, if you were inspired by it, the easiest way to say thank you is to support the work of the Peaceful Heart Network. To do that, all you need to do is go to 24hoursoftapping.com/support. And as you look in the description and the first comment down below, you will see a direct link to that. I hope you enjoy this conversation. This is someone who has truly dedicated her life and her professional work, working all over the world, doing work very, very similar to the Peaceful Heart Network. Next up is my friend, Dr. Leyden. Lori is an internationally known trauma healing professional, transformational leader, and mentor who finds the miracles that are possible out of tragedy. She has brought comfort, peace, and hope to thousands from Rwanda to Sandy Hook, Connecticut, Australian indigenous people and refugees groups and survivors of the Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in Parkland, Florida. Please, please, please welcome to the digital stage, Leyden. Hello, my friend.
Hello, Gene, and just such a huge shout out to you and Elaine and everyone who is coming together for this amazing summit, I would call it. People know I'm a crier. I've been watching for 2 hours. I'm crying already.
Lori, that is the reason why we have this right here. Hashtag tear tally, because that is what we are doing as we are navigating our way through this. We're counting the number of times that we cry as we do this stuff, because that is just what it is. And when we do this sort of work, when we get the opportunity to meet people like you consistently do, we recognize the value of those really simple individual connections. Like, it's wonderful to do things on grand monumental scales, but in your work, you've had this opportunity to just walk with individuals in the midst of these things. And we create these ripples out from doing that. And the beautiful thing is, we don't have to be sharing it in the most extreme places. Any person that we share a little comfort with, any place we share a smile, any place that we share some tapping, what we're doing is we're making the world better for all of us as we do this stuff. And so, like, grand gestures are awesome, but the little stuff is the stuff that's really valuable as well. So.
May I? And I want to riff off that in a second, but I would just love to take a moment for you, who is in your third hour already, and for everybody who's listening, if we could just take a moment to place our hands on our hearts and close our eyes and just take that full inhale and that full exhale. And feel how good it feels to drop in to that stillness. Imagine connecting your heart with what I call the divine one heart. Imagine that infinity circuit that connects us. And with each breath, as we drop into just another layer of stillness, there's only love and peace. And just feel how good it feels to simply drop in, taking a moment in time to notice how you feel in your mind and your heart and your body. To be here now. And just another deep inhale and deep exhale. Feeling how good it feels to be here in this present moment. And when you feel ready, just gently opening your eyes.
So on my little mug here, I have a little sticker that says first action, best action, which is my reminder. What is the first action I can take to make the next action the best action? And what you just demonstrated for us is that the first action to set ourselves up for health, for well-being, for success, for being fully present in the moment doesn't have to be complicated. It's put our hands in the heart, take a couple of deep breaths, drop into our body, and just be present. And it makes the thing that comes next so much easier, because like I can just, like when I do that, like I just felt the roots grow out of the bottom of my feet as I'm sitting here and being present to what's going on. So with that being said, and this is in big ways and smalls, you and I have been having this conversation for more than a decade. How did you get connected to wanting to bring transformational tools to places of just real struggle, real suffering in the work that you are doing in the organization that you run, and the different roles that you've had over that time? Because I've talked to you in lots of places over the years. Like, what was the thing that got you pulled that direction? How did you land in that place?
In some ways, it's very simple, and other ways it could seem complicated. I do this work in an effort to heal my own trauma wounds. And from a very early age, from traumatic childhood, blah, 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 I went in search of what were the most elegant ways to heal. And back in the day, and I won't say how old I am now, Jean, but back in the day, there were no somatic release techniques like EFT and TTT. And every time I tried to find healing, it was more painful. And I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars finding the most elegant tools. So all of this starts with my own healing first, which is it is my message to everyone that committing to your own healing first is your greatest service work in the world. There is nothing else you can be doing except doing your own trauma healing first. That is the way that you can bring yourself fully present in your heart to what we know are tremendous tragedies in the world. So I do it, I guess, for selfish reasons. Mm-hmm. And then the beauty is I get to work all over the world with amazing people who are committed to doing the same thing. So also, obviously all about my own trauma healing work first. And always genocide, even as a child. I had such a connection to genocide that I couldn't believe that this stuff was still happening in our lifetime. And I'll just, move through that quickly, but it really touched my heart. So when I received the call, I got an email from someone in Rwanda who had read my first book, the Stress Management Handbook, and said, "Can we translate this into Kinyarwanda?" Well, you know now, Jean, because you have been there, you and Elaine, which is a whole other thing, that the language of Rwanda is Kinyarwanda. So I knew that. And they said, and I said, of course, yes, please translate it. What else can I do? And they said, well, please come here and teach your trauma healing skills. And I said, yes. And then I went, how the am I going to do that? Doesn't matter. I was not in a financial situation to do that. And this is important to this whole 24 hours of tapping, because I didn't want to raise money. I didn't want to ask people for money. I thought I should have the money to be able to do it myself. And so, but I found out that by asking people to support me, I was giving them an incredible gift to do the work with me, to partner with me, knowing that they couldn't go to Rwanda or these other places I've been to, just like Gunilla and Ulf, but that we put our hearts and our resources behind them. And this is what real abundance is. Abundance is not necessarily having the bank account, it's having access to resources. And so everyone who's listening and everyone who's benefiting from this, I'll call it Summit 24 Hours, is also receiving so much, and just a tiny tithing, $10, $20, $50, whatever it is, makes such a difference, not only to the people on the ground, like to the people like myself and Gunilla and Olive who go on the ground, but to the people on the ground who know that there are hundreds and thousands of people who see them, who are recognizing their pain, who are holding space for them. So I think I'm getting a little off the track, but that's
okay. No, but I mean, because that's where we are. I mean, like one of the things that's really important is to recognize is that, the way that we show up and the way we make transformation is where we are and what we're capable of. And so like our starting point is our starting point. I can remember I was having a conversation with a tapping practitioner friend of mine as we were getting ready to go to East Africa. And they said to me, I can never do that. Like it's not me. And I'm like, that's great. That's awesome. That's not a deficiency. That's not wrong. That's not a mistake. That's just, again, if we truly believe this fact that we are all connected in this really profound way, every single time we do something that is kind and good, Rick, who we talked to earlier, his vocabulary, vibrational leadership. Showing up in a way where we make this small difference, an energetic environmentalist, like by making these small changes, do that. And so as we lean into that, I love this idea of, talking about resiliency as practitioner as we step into this, because like, no matter how gung-ho we are, no matter where our comfort level is, every single time we bump up to the edge of that comfort level, we spend resource. We can put ourselves in a place where we're not caring for ourselves in that way. So as you think about like this sense of resiliency as practitioner, what does that mean to you, and how has that shaped what you are doing as you navigate the world and you share tapping with others?
Yeah. Thank you for that. So when I got the call to Rwanda and I said yes, I knew that I could bring my educational skills, my tapping skills, my spiritual mentoring skills. And so, but what I knew to be true was that I spent 3 months working on my inner self. And this is the resiliency for practitioners that I am speaking to directly. We all want to make a difference in the world. However, in preparing to go to Rwanda, could I sit with a child who had lost his parents and his siblings in the genocide? Could I sit with a widow who was living with AIDS because she had been tortured and her family had been murdered during the war? Could I sit with a man, a genocidaire, as they call it, who had murdered 100 people? Could I do this and be fully present with no ego and allow everything to drop away so that I could be what I wanted to be as a healing presence? And that's the work I did for 3 months, really looking deeply inside. And this is the work that I brought to all the other communities I've been in since then. And we can talk about that. The bottom line was, when I arrived in Rwanda for the first time, many things to be said about this, but I chose to simply listen and observe and be part of communities first before I ever offered anything. Because my deal is, I've got to partner with people. I don't know anything about what is happening in this community. I bring my skills, my talents, but I must partner with you in your brilliance and understanding of your own community. And so all the work that I did to prepare myself to be present, interestingly, came forward in a particular 3 weeks in to Rwanda, my first trip, 2007. 200 people in a Christian service. At the time, the only trauma healing technique they had was catharsis. That's a whole nother bookmark, but the notion that if you continue to cathart your story, that you will be healed. We know now that in the study of brain physiology, that trauma creates a brain dysfunction, and the more that you repeat your story without having any kind of somatic release, like EFT, continues to create more dysregulation in the body. Anyway, at this point, there was no translator, 200 people, 3-hour session. At the end of the session, and I'm the only white chick in the place, and I could just tell, it was like, they're like, who is this white chick and what does she want? Understandably so, because white people have not been the best purveyors of help and assistance in Africa. So these 12 women surround me, and they were clearly elderly women living with AIDS and many, many disfigurements and problems from the genocide. And this one woman stepped forward, and she put her shirt down and showed me her chest, which was clearly mutilated by machetes. Now, I say this because if you're a practitioner and you think you want to work with trauma, you got to be ready to deal with that. At the time, because of all the work that I did, I only felt complete communion with this woman. And if I had not done the work that I had done to be fully present, I think I would have disintegrated, because I had no money, I had no food, I had nothing to give this woman. And in that moment, everything dropped away, and I put her hand to my chest, and I put my hand to her chest, and we just deeply, deeply looked into each other's eyes, and I felt complete oneness. And I felt like she and I were one. And then when the moment was complete, the other women came in for a hug, and I knew this woman gave me the greatest gift, because she was willing to be present to me. And in that moment, I knew that my presence was enough. And when I say that, I mean this sincerely. It was enough for me then to begin to do my work, if that makes any sense.
It does. And I think one of the things that there's so many really good things that you're touching on inside of that. But one of the things that I want, just off that last little statement that you said there, is I'm so happy as a tapping community, we spend less time talking about 1 minute and 1 session miracles. And creating this sense of really unrealistic expectations, because I have seen spontaneous transformation. I've seen deep healing in a round of tapping, in a session of tapping. Like, I'm 100% open to the possibility of that particular thing. But I think that, like, the biggest change to me as a practitioner in the last 5 years is the speed in which I go when I'm working with clients. And I am so much slower than I was 5 years ago. I am so much slower than I was 10 years ago, because it's process. It's not a moment. And like you're saying, as you were talking about catharsis, like, we're understanding so much more about trauma, simple and complex, and how it impacts us in so many ways, and making sure that we are gentle and safe. And in a couple of hours, we're going to have a conversation about trauma-informed approaches to all of these things. But like, for me to let go of my ego of doing a good job and helping someone has been a real struggle for me as a practitioner, because like with my dyslexia, with the things that I struggle with, I am a super, super, super competent human being. Like I recognize the fact that I have been given some natural gifts that put me at one end of the bell curve, which also then becomes part of the way that I define myself as I go into the world. And to be in a circumstance to be able to get out of my own ego and get out of my own expectation, to be able to be present as far as we can go in this. And we is my capacity, my skill, your capacity, your ability to be able to do transformation in this moment. Years ago, I got a chance to work with someone who's severely traumatized in Peru. And we did 90 seconds of tapping. He drank 64 ounces of water, and then he slept for the next 18 hours. Because that was he had 90 seconds of capacity for transformation. And for us to be in a circumstance, because like, it's all well and good for me to say, I am doing this for the good of others. And I truly believe that is going on inside of all of that. And I'm also susceptible at the end of a tapping session going, you did an awesome job today, Gene. And it's good for me to be confident in what I'm doing. But if I'm defining myself by the rate that the person I'm having the opportunity to sit with is transforming at, I am not recognizing their humanity. I am not showing up as a useful helper. And, this idea of like resilience for me is not about how I am for this client. Resilience for me is how am I for the people I get to be helpers to for the next week, the next month, the next decade, the next whatever that thing looks like. And so like for you to have the self-awareness in that moment to go, okay, this is what I got. And this is as far as I can go in this particular moment. Like there's so much wisdom in that we need to be reminding ourselves as helpers what that looks like in a healthy way for us and for them.
And so, interestingly, once again, my own experiences then led me to training teams to take to Rwanda, doing the same thing. Yeah. Your resume is your resume. You got your skills, right? But I want to make sure that you are delivering your skills from that heart presencing place, as you described, where we are transcending our ego. And so that became my theme through the last, it's now 15, 16 years, through Rwanda, Newtown, Aboriginal and refugee communities in Australia, and Parkland, the Stoneman Douglas, Broward County situations. I did the same thing. Every time I went into these communities, I stayed very quiet underneath the radar. I invited people to have an experience, and then we used those experiences to create collaborations to bring tapping to people in that community. How at the same time, no volunteer. I'm a bit of a, what do you call it? I'm a mama bear when it comes to promoting people who can actually deal with severe trauma. Mm-hmm. And so we did, in all of these communities I just mentioned, we have done years and years of mentoring and supervision. People did not just, I think, I will say this in all sincerity, that the current levels of training in tapping in level 1, level 2 tend to make people feel like when they take that one day of tapping for trauma that they can do it. The phrase that I like, the way I like to describe that is tapping is not a qualifying tool.
if you are not qualified to work with the issue without tapping, tapping does not qualify you to be able to do it. Now, if I'm qualified, tapping makes what I do so much more effective. I'm able to do deeper in that sort of stuff. But just like handing me a really awesome knife doesn't mean that I'm now a sushi chef. Like, just because I have the tool doesn't mean I'm capable of doing it. And so I think, I like what you're highlighting there, I think is so super important for us to recognize.
Beautiful. And so in terms of resiliency for practitioners, I only teach clinical evidence-based EFT tapping. I don't teach self-care tapping, which is a whole nother thing.
Yep.
And especially in these communities that I go into.
Right.
And so the number one thing I ask my volunteers to do is use the personal peace procedure in a little bit of a different way. So if you're an EFT practitioner, you don't use the personal peace procedure, you're doing yourself a disservice. Meaning, this personal peace procedure, Gary Craig used that term. Basically, it's about making a list of things that dysregulate your physiology. That's a whole nother discussion. But anything that's on your mind that bugs you, anything that continues to, as I call it, rent space in your head, is something you should be tapping on. If you're a practitioner and you have clients, the way that I do supervision and mentoring, you come to me and you say, oh, I have a client who does XYZ. I don't care what the client is doing. I only care about you as the practitioner and your response to that client. What judgments do you have about that client? What contractions do you have? That's where I go with mentoring and supervision. It's not about how you are delivering your protocol. I want to know who you are and what your relationship is with your client and how you're dealing with that. So personal peace procedure, huge, huge. And then, as many people know, I use the grace process, which is a spiritual tool I received after a near-death experience 20 years ago, but I combine the grace process with EFT tapping, and it's a way to transcend our egos, as Jean, you mentioned, a way to transcend our agendas, to be fully present, and to work through our own blocks to being the best healing presence that we can be. And that is the work. Always. It's not about learning another technique. It's not about reading the next thing. It's about the internal work. Are you committed to doing your internal work? And those are the people that I take into these on-country experiences with me, if that makes sense.
And as you talk about that in the way that you're looking backwards with the personal peace procedure, I do something similar, but I look forward just because I am super analytical, super practicalist. And so for me, what I am doing in a very similar way is I'm paying attention to the things I want to do. And when I am not, going, resistance. Okay, that means that something is in the way. So much so that I have a rule that if I have something I want to do and I move it 3 days on my to-do list, when I move it to the third day, I then have to put myself on my the calendar of the practitioner I work with. Because what that is for me is it's shining a light on, there is something that is dysregulated in you for you to do the thing that you think is valuable and you are not doing it. And someone who claims to have all of these skills to do this internal transformation has now been 3 days where you've had an opportunity to do something with it. Therefore, it's time for you to respond in a different way, and holding myself accountable, because if I don't, it's really easy for it to be a week and a half. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm really avoiding this particular thing. And so for me, I find that a more practical way. Like, it works more with my internal rhythms of finding those things, but like, what's the most important thing that we're getting to here is this recognizing, these are the places. And again, like the constructions, the judgments, the how we are showing up. Like for me, at least for me, when I am in those circumstances, almost always it is not about how I am formed as a practitioner, but instead about who I am and the things I'm struggling with. And that's the reason why those lenses, those judgments, I'm not seeing something. It's the lens that is in the way. I'm looking through this red pane of glass to see them this particular way, and I am not seeing them clearly. And my responsibility is to make that opaque, or to make that clear, so I can see what is on the other side of that particular thing as we're navigating that.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Meaning I agree. And that's my experience. Also, there's a big difference between EFT practitioners who are simply coaches and EFT and licensed mental health professionals who deliver EFT. And in my career, in order to scale and replicate EFT and to make it a scientifically based, acceptable practice in first world countries with mental health practitioners, licensed mental health professionals. This has been my goal when I went into Sandy Hook, Newtown, and Parkland, Broward County. Broward County is a county of 3.5 million people, all of whom were affected by that school shooting. 32 mental health organizations, who none of whom were using EFT. I worked there for 2 years. I trained 200 licensed mental health professionals. They weren't certified in EFT, but I trained them in the most basic EFT regulation techniques, so that they were able to go in immediately with certain techniques and create. So this has been my focus, is how do we bring this to the professional world, which is a whole different,
Yeah. And so it's like, for me, one of the shifts that have happened inside of my head in the last 9 to 18 months is I have moved tapping away from an approach to tapping as a tool. And like a knife is a tool. And I can cut twine with a tool, I can cut sushi with a tool, I can do surgery with a tool. But just because I can do one of those things, I am skilled to cut a box open, I am not skilled to do surgery on myself. And so what you're talking about here is going, awesome, I have people going into a really difficult situation. What is a tool that I can give them so they can be present to the people in front of them? I have people going into a really difficult situation. What is a tool that I can have them teach so the other person can be comfortable, which is a radically different thing than sitting with a psychologist who works with clients who have dissociated identity disorder, and they're doing that stuff. Tapping is amazing for DID. And if I was working with someone who had DID, I would be doing way more harm than good, even though the tool I have at my disposal is useful because I'm outside of that context. And so I love the way that you're talking about, like, not only is it about like us taking care of ourselves and doing our work, but also us recognizing where the boundaries are and how we use this thing. And tapping is not tapping is not tapping is not tapping. Like it looks the same. What is going on in the body is the same, but the issues and the application and that sort of stuff is something that is so different that I love the fact that you're shining a light on that particular piece of it.
And the most exciting part of this, I think you're going to invite me to do a little tapping, something with you.
As a matter of fact, that you can read my mind. That was the next thing that was coming out of my mouth.
And so I'm going to, what do we have? Another 13 minutes or so?
We need to be done about 5 of the top of the hour. So we've got 7 minutes
great.
left.
I'll stop now. But I will say this, for anyone who knows me, please just keep in touch. There's a lot more backstory to this, but I teach one tapping tool that is the resiliency tool for the practitioner and for the client. It is the most simple thing that we can do. And I ask people to do this every hour for 2 minutes. And it's simply tap and breathe. Because, and I'll just set this up and then we'll go in because it's not going to take long. And I'm going to invite you, Jean, at the top of every hour you have for the next 21 hours to do a little tap and breathe.
I set my timer for 3 minutes and I do this day and night, tapping without words. Absolutely. It's my favorite.
So the bottom line is, what people don't understand is that trauma creates a brain dysfunction, and this affects your heart-brain-body connection. And if we don't regulate that heart-brain-body connection, we don't have access to our higher brain functioning. So literally, the only thing that any practitioner needs to do for themselves and their client is to start with tap and breathe. Because if the client is not regulated and you are not regulated, no therapeutic benefit is going to happen. It might be palliative, which is a lot of what happens with tapping. A lot of palliative stuff, but it's all about regulating the physiology. I start at the top of the head just because when we were working in communities with young people, we found it was easier to simply start at the top of the head, and then we added the gamut point, which was the trauma point. Mm-hmm. Dr. Peter Stapleton is is a colleague that I work with a lot, and she's going to be on shortly.
Yes, she is.
She identified that this was a legitimate pattern. So all I'm going to ask people to do is to simply start at the top of the head and take a full inhale and exhale. And you'll notice I'm doing an auditory inhale and exhale. I call it straw breathing, because oftentimes we don't know if we're really taking the full inhale unless we feel it in the body. And exhale. Side of the eye. Just taking that full inhale. And exhale. Under the eye, full inhale. And exhale. Noticing how your shoulders may relax and your breathing may deepen. Inhale. And exhale. Under the lips. Inhale. And exhale. Here on the chest. Inhale. And exhale. Under the arm. Inhale. And exhale. Top of the hand between the fourth and the fifth finger, the gamut point. Inhale. And exhale. I'm just going to ask people to close your eyes and take another full inhale and another full exhale. And just tune in. What do you notice about your breathing? How expanded or heart contracted it is? And if it feels contracted, I invite you to do another round. But know that you can do this every hour for 2 minutes. You do not have 2 minutes every hour. Because I guarantee you, if you're not doing this physiological regulation, you're not being efficient or productive, your heart, brain, body is not firing the way that it needs to. That is my if you do that for 2 days, I promise you will see a difference.
When I have a really busy day and I'm feeling overwhelmed, it's not on the clock. It's literally, I do a task, I cross it off, I do a minute of wordless tapping. I do the next task, I cross it off, I do a minute of wordless tapping, and it just becomes the rhythm. Before I'm allowed to go on to the next thing, again, I just set my watch for a minute and just, like the old Yellow Pages ads say, let the fingers do the walking, and just be present to the body as we're navigating all of that. And it just makes such a huge difference. So, well, Lori, thank you. Thank you so much for your time, but more so, thank you so much for giving your life to serving these communities in this sort of way. The world and my world is better because you are out there doing that sort of work. And it's just awesome, awesome, awesome.
I always receive more than I give, Jean. And just to say about, I had the great privilege to work with Gunilla in Rwanda. We did a joint presentation to prison staff. It was a huge 3-day event. And this is the reason why I'm so excited about the various levels of EFT, clinical, TT, that serve the world in various stages of trauma. And we've got it going on. And Jean, you and 24-hour tapping crew are lending more credence and more beauty and more possibility. And I'm just so grateful to you.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to see you soon, my friend. I hope you have a fabulous evening, and thanks again for your time. If you found this interview inspiring, I would encourage you to support the Peaceful Heart Network by going to 24hoursoftapping.com/support or clicking the link in the description. And you will see on the screen right now a playlist to all of the interviews from this year's and last year's 24 Hours of Tapping. I hope you enjoyed those as well.